Good morning, and thank you all for joining us for today's featured webinar. Today, we're going to have a very in-depth presentation regarding business fraud, what has changed, and how to protect yourself from loss this holiday season. Today's featured webinar is sponsored by M&T Bank and produced as well by CMIT Solutions. I'm going to turn the program over to Erin O'Grady. She's the Vice President of Business Banking, Relationship Manager for M&T Bank. Erin, thank you so much for being here, and I'll let you introduce the rest of the team today.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. Good morning. As Amanda said, my name is Erin O'Grady with M&T Bank. I'm a business banking relationship manager here in the Tarrytown market. My clients come to me for guidance when they have needs for access to capital, but they also come to me to educate them on the most effective and secure way to move their money. I'm joined here today with Mike Madonia, who's the team leader here in the market, and also Nikhil Jaga from CMIT Solutions. Nikhil, you want to say hello?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Morning, everyone. I'm Nikhil Jaga, President of CMIT Solutions. As a technologist for 15 years, I've had the opportunity to work with businesses of all sizes, helping them and advising them on how to use technology to make their business more productive and efficient. What's really surprised me is how often small business owners get frustrated with technology. While juggling multiple priorities, they often get sidetracked. So by planning and proactively managing their technology, I take them from getting frustrated with technology to succeeding with technology, so they can spend more time focusing on their business. I'm looking forward to this webinar.
Thank you, Nikhil. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're going to go through this presentation, and it would be wonderful if you could put your questions in the chat, and we'll address them at the end. I wanted to also just make note, we're going to be playing an audio in a moment, so please make sure that you turn up the volume on your computer so that you can hear the audio. And then without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to speak to you today about fraud. There's many types of fraud in the industry, and how it impacts your business and what you can do to protect yourself. We're going to start today with an actual callback from our wire room. This was a real fraud that happened to a small business owner named Jack, and I'd like you to take a listen. Nikhil, if you play that.
Green speaking. How can I help you? Hi, Gina. This is M&T Bank calling, and we're on a recorded line. How are you? I'm good, thank you. I just have one outgoing wire here to verify. Do you have a moment? Yeah, let me pull up the information. Okay, I'm ready. Right, it's for $314,701.65. Yes, what do you need to know? The beneficiary name? Right, manufacturing export. And the beneficiary bank. Hang Seng Bank. The last 4 digits of the beneficiary account number? 0903. Perfect. And how did you receive your wire instructions? A PDF to an email, an attachment to an email. Great. Did you also verbally confirm those instructions with them? It wasn't me, so no. Do you know if they were verbally confirmed by someone in the company, or I don't know offhand. I'm a third-party person entering the information on this one. Okay, the reason we ask is because the banking industry is seeing situations in which fraudsters use email to impersonate someone within the business and then request someone to send a wire transfer. So would you like to contact to see if they were verbally confirmed, or are you comfortable releasing it without that verification? Oh, I'm comfortable releasing it without. This is our CEO asking for this, so I'm sure he's working directly with somebody. Okay, so you're comfortable releasing the wire without it being verbally confirmed? Correct. Okay, So I will go ahead and release the wire in that case. Are there any other wires that you'd like me to check on? Nope, that's it. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Have a great weekend.
So I'll give that a second to sink in. But what you just heard was the small business owner, Jack, being the victim of executive impersonation. And executive impersonation occurs when a fraudster uses a fake email address and poses as a company executive. I know business owners, are always asking themselves, how could this happen? It's scary, it's upsetting, makes you angry, right? And I think we kind of know why this could potentially happen. Business owners are focused on growing their business. They're focused on, running the day-to-day, day-to-day operations. And sometimes they're not necessarily focused on protecting their bank accounts or keeping their computer systems up to date or putting internal controls in place. You're training your employees to do their day-to-day jobs, but not necessarily making them aware of all the potential fraud schemes that are out there. So what we heard was, this employee received an email from the CEO authorizing a wire. The employee sent out a wire for over $300,000, but she clearly did not know that it was a fake email. You could hear that in her voice. She was adamant that she was acting on behalf of the CEO. But what she failed to do, she failed to do the callback and speak to the actual CEO to confirm that wire. And that's ultimately where that breakdown in communication happened and the fraud was able to occur. They tried to get the money back, but with wire fraud, it is very unlikely to recover the money. This situation is not covered by FDIC insurance. Nikhil, if you could go to the next slide. So I'd like to talk to you today about what's changed, right? What has changed in the past 18 months and continues to change? I think that we can all, recognize that we are living in, unknown times as to, small business owners or, just for our own personal lives. Nobody's been faced with the challenges we've been faced with. Business owners have literally had to change their way of operating and pivot on a dime to, business as usual. That term doesn't even apply anymore, right? They've had to go from, maybe coming into a branch and making deposits or having somebody in the branch, someone in their office go to the branch and make deposits to transition and now put things in place like remote check deposit so that they don't, that doesn't have to happen anymore. They're now trying to cut down on how many paper checks get issued, right? They're trying to cut down on paper. So they're no longer handing out, checks for payroll or, now they're trying to, cut down on paper. So they're paying their bills online or they're trying to accept payments electronically with things like invoice and pay. And those things are wonderful. And the communication process changes. And they've implemented all these things. I know all the business owners have had to, implement over the past 18 months. But with all of that and running their business, have they been able to take a step back and really think about what processes they put in place to stay connected and prevent fraud? So, it says here, right? Distracted management, depleted staff, work from home, cash flow struggles, all of these things are very real, but protecting yourself from fraud is very real too. So, Nikhil, if you can go to the next slide. Okay. So we started off with a wire room callback that outlined the executive impersonation that, our first business owner, Jack, fell victim to. But executive impersonation starts with something called phishing. And what phishing is when a fraudster uses a fraudulent email that's designed to look like a legitimate email to phish for confidential information about you, and gain access to your email account. Business email compromise, the fraudster gains access to your actual email accounts and many times your actual computer systems, and you can be locked out. Once the fraudster is able to gain access, they target these specific payment methods that I've outlined below. So, the first one, wire transfers. That is probably the top payment method that's being targeted. Then ACH credits and ACH debits. Remember I said that the big switch to eliminating paper. So those things are what the targets, what those fraudsters are trying to get to when they gain access to your systems. 75% of businesses have been targets of business email compromise. So I would be remiss if I did not talk about another type of fraud here, which is also very alive and well, and still very much affecting business owners, unfortunately. Fraudulent checks, so counterfeit, forged, and altered checks are still rampant in the industry, and it has major impact on business owners. I'll share with you one of my clients that came on board a few years ago, shared his personal situation with me. He was a victim of check fraud, and it all started with his bookkeeper that noticed someone was withdrawing money, started out very small amounts, $1, $2, and then suddenly $10, $15, $20,000 was being pulled out of his bank account. And it was just, eye-opening. And of course, they alerted the bank to let them know what was taking place. And the bank's suggestion was, no problem, we'll close the account, we'll open a new one. And so they did that. They took the guidance from the bank. However, this happened 5 times to this business owner. And there was no other recommendation from their bank, just to close the account and reopen one. This caused them great disruption to their reputation. They had to spend their time calling up contractors and vendors and letting people know that, who they owed money to please don't cash that check. And then they had to explain why can't I cash the check? They owe these people money, and they had to give them a reason why they couldn't cash the check. So then they had to, then tell them that they got frauded. So that was very uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing to have to explain that to, your vendors. There was a disruption to their time and money, right? So now their bookkeeper is spending half of her time reissuing checks, getting the new accounts up and running, and then a week later having to do the same thing all over again. And then there was the disruption to their security. It's a very personal thing, having somebody gain access to your accounts and just not knowing, what's going to happen when you go to sleep at night. It's not a good feeling. And one of the things that my client shared with me was he appreciated so much that, I took the time to educate him on, our fraud products and services and how we could help prevent this from happening. And he said M&T eliminated that uneasy feeling that the other bank couldn't. So it's really so important to be able to know what your options are. So protecting your business account from fraud is crucial, right? What can you do today to protect yourself? The first simple step that you can take to protect yourself is to protect your bank accounts from fraud. Prevent people from gaining unauthorized access to your account information and your cash, right? Implement things like positive pay and ACH Monitor to protect against other fraud schemes. Reach out to your bank. This is what I'm talking to my clients about, right? I'm educating them on how to protect the movement of their money. And it's so important. The next thing that you can do, that's a little bit more in depth, but also crucially important, is to maintain internal controls, right? We saw that in the very first example, you know, with regard to the movement of money and payment processing, implement company level secondary authorizations for all ACH and wire payments, segregate out your payment functions, and segregate your permissions, right? Don't let everybody have the same capability. You need to be able to, you know, have an added level of security. And it all starts with your system, right? So it's very important to be able to protect your bank account, protect people from gaining unauthorized access to your money. It is equally as important to protect your systems. And at this time, I'd love to be able to have Nikhil talk to you more about protecting your systems.
Thanks, Erin. When I speak to small business owners like yourself, they tell me, I'm such a small part of the market, fraud will never happen to me. Who would want to come into my computer systems or my bank accounts because I'm such a small business? And I believe them until I met someone who showed me this email. This is an example of a sales order, a fake sales order that was almost processed. And if they had processed it, they would have given up some confidential information. So small business owners tell me, you know, fraud will never happen to them, you know, until I met someone who was actually a victim and didn't take the time to protect themselves. And they told me, you will never think it's you. It will be everybody else until it happens to you. Then you have to handle all these problems and it emotionally takes a toll. The idea that when you go home and you go to sleep, that somebody's in your computer systems or your bank accounts and can do whatever they want is very disturbing. I heard this story not once, but repeated many, many times. So in the next 7 minutes, I'm going to walk you through why small business owners are targets. How can you tell a fake email from a real email? And what are simple steps you can do today to protect yourself? So what is driving this attack, or why are small businesses becoming victims? You know, very simple. You know, the business owners are juggling multiple priorities. So they lack the time and the budget and the expertise to protect themselves. You know, we business owners, we don't have specialist security people on our payroll, and the employees, they're so focused on the day-to-day, they don't necessarily have the training to be aware of what's out there. The one thing that you know, we don't often think about is small businesses. We are vendors to other bigger companies. So, for example, back in 2013, Target was breached, and you know, the theory was they got into the Target system through their HVAC vendor, who was storing their passwords in Excel in clear text. So that's very attractive for people who want to get into bigger businesses. So what does that mean for you? So on average, if your computer systems come down or are locked out, the cost of downtime meaning you're not able to operate if your systems are locked, on average is over $274,000. And the number of days you're down is 21 days. So I know these are averages, but what we need to think about is, what does this mean for small business owners? You know, does this mean that you can't put money in expanding your business? Does this mean it's a year's salary? Or does this mean delaying retirement? So before we think about, you know, fraud will never happen to me, I encourage you to think about is, what is the cost of not protecting yourself? So let's get really concrete and very tactical. The second thing I want to share with you is, you know, how do you tell a fake email from a genuine one? So again, I want to remind you, phishing is a fraudster who uses a fraudulent email that's designed to look very legitimate. But the idea is they want to grab confidential information from you or somehow gain access to your systems. So imagine you or your employees are rushing to finish up on a Friday evening, and you get an email from Amazon, and holiday season, everyone's shopping on Amazon. And I put together here side-by-side examples of a genuine email and as well as a fake. And I'll give everyone a second to kind of absorb this, and we'll walk through, how do you tell the difference? But you can see this is one of those order confirmations you get after you've shopped on Black Friday or whenever. And there's an email on the left side, and then there's an email on the right side. So yeah, feel free to put in the chat if you have any ideas on which one could be fake or which one could be genuine. But in general, what you want to look at is the one on the left side is fake, because the first thing you want to do is look at the email address. So this is coming from admin at Microsoft. This is not coming from Amazon. The date formats are a little different. The subject line is very generic, but on the right side, when you order stuff from Amazon, the subject line is very specific. The big thing here is on the left side, you'll see that there is a sense of urgency that is created. So if you don't order this item, cancel this purchase, we take security action. So this is very common. People who want to send you these fake emails, they want to create a sense of urgency or create some kind of emotion. So they might email you about, change your bank account password or you'll be locked or something like this. So, and they'll also ask you to click on links, which take you not to Amazon, but somewhere else. So here are a couple of things, you should be always looking at when you receive emails. So what simple steps can you do right now to protect yourself? So every time you get an email, you want to run through the 6 or 7 items, ask these questions to yourself, and see if this email makes sense. So you want to look at, was this email unexpected? Was this email urging any urgent action? Was this addressed specifically to me, or was this generically like a dear sir or valued customer? Was this really coming from Amazon, or was this from a Gmail account? Does this have a lot of mistakes? Does it have any weird looking links? And obviously you never want to click on those. And does this have any attachments, and are they enticing me to click on those? So every time you get an email, run through these questions. And if you are answering yes to 2 or more of these, you're most likely you have a fake email and you should be deleting those. But what can you do in the near term? So 90% of these breaches are happening because of human error. So you want to make sure that you're training yourself and your employees regularly on the do's and don'ts. So for example, make sure you're creating strong passwords for your accounts, you're not reusing them. You're using secure Wi-Fi and not using the public Wi-Fi at a Starbucks or something. And there are many, many more items you want to train yourself, but making sure you're backing up your data. So one of the most common questions I get at this point is, Nikhil, can you help me? And the answer is yes. And the way to do that is you can set up a 30-minute, let's get you protected call with Erin and myself, and we will identify your 3 immediate risks and a fraud action plan to protect yourself. The way to do that is you can email Erin at this email address. Whether you're a business with 5 employees or 50, this call can help you. So picture a day when you can go to bed knowing that your bank accounts are protected because you've put the controls in place. Picture a day when you can go to bed knowing your computer systems are secure. And picture a day where you can go to bed knowing that you're going to be spending more time on your business than handling technology. So I'll close with this. Small business deserve to be protected from financial fraud. Small businesses deserve to be secure. So I encourage you to reach out and set up this call. And we'll take any questions at this point.
Nikhil and Erin, thank you for the presentation. My name is Mike Madonia. For everybody out there, I'm with M&T Bank as well. I work with Erin, team lead in business banking. So I don't see any questions in the chat. You're free to ask any questions openly, or feel free to post them in the chat for us, and we'll handle the questions. But I did have a couple that I wrote down as we were going through the presentation. Nikhil, if you don't mind me asking a question.
Yeah, sure.
So Aaron, the first one is for Aaron. You talked a little bit about FDIC insurance, and I do see this as, as a bank employee for 15 plus years, is something that comes up quite often, that there's a misnomer out there that fraud is covered by FDIC insurance. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And, if not, what might be else available for business owners?
So the FDIC insurance is not designed to protect accounts against fraud. It's really designed to protect. It's really designed to protect in the event of bank failure. It's not designed for fraud. What you would put in place to protect fraud would be those fraud prevention tools on your accounts, things like Positive Pay, which basically I can walk through a little bit about that. Mike, do you want me to go into the different fraud?
Yeah, my next question was going to be, around insurance, but also one or two products that folks might be able to ask their bank about when they speak with them. So for example, in order to protect your account, let's say if you are issuing checks, you can implement something called Positive Pay, and you can do that in a few ways. One would be to upload a file that lets the bank know what checks were actually written out. Or when you go in for every check that you want to send out, you would put it into the system. And what that does is it prevents fraud from happening, because you would log into the system in the morning and you would see if there was any item to decision. So for example, if a check number was being presented for payment and it didn't match what you uploaded to the bank, it would come up in the system, and you would have to actually look and make sure that that information was correct, and you would approve that item. If you did not approve that item, the default would be to not pay that check. It's very important. Sometimes, I've seen it happen. I have some very large clients that, have to issue checks for whatever reason. It's a nice way to prevent, sometimes there's a mistake, right? The business owners make an honest mistake if they're uploading information. So that, helps in that regard, but it also prevents fraud. Other items that you would want to put in place would be things like Ach Monitor. So it prevents anyone from pulling money from your account unauthorized. So for example, you would want to put in your payroll company. You'd want to be able to put like a range. So, because obviously payroll is not the same amount all the time, or, for your taxes that are being pulled, you don't have to put the exact dollar amount, but you'd want to give a range so that if something came up, you would get notified, you would go in and decision it so that that ACH could go through. Conversely, if something came up and it wasn't authorized, obviously you don't decision, you decline it, right? And then if you don't decision it at all and it sits there, the default again would be it would not get paid. So having tools like this on your account are really invaluable. There are some businesses that have, they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the money in those bank accounts. So it's really, you can't, you have to comply with insurance requirements, to keep that money safe. So you need to have fraud protections. in place. It's funny, right? For some businesses, you have a fiduciary responsibility and you have to have fraud protections in place. But it makes you think, why wouldn't you want to have that in place, without that responsibility? Like you want to protect your own money for you, not to comply with somebody else.
Thanks, Aaron. And I'll only add that, these most of these services, you might say, well, I'm protected. I know I'm protected. And I would venture to say that unless you added on these services to your accounts, that you probably don't have it. These aren't standard products when you open a bank account that you're automatically subscribed to. So
No,
great.
You're not, and you have to have training on them, so you would
Right.
know if you had them.
Nikhil, a fantastic job going through. I was looking at the side by side, and initially I couldn't figure it out, but I could see myself, clicking on one of those links on the fake one, especially if I did have an order in place with Amazon, which is fairly usual in my household.
Yeah.
Can you share, is there anything that you could share if something does happen, what you recommend if I do click on that link and realize later it wasn't legit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you've clicked on it and it was in any way you initiated, say, a financial transaction or something, first, obviously, you want to call your bank and you take the appropriate measures. You want to, call if you do have an IT provider, you want to call them right away because they're the experts and they can tell you what exactly to do. So do just not now, but investigate why you received that in the first place, because most of the time you can proactively block such emails. But if you don't have an IT provider or a technology provider, what you want to do is don't take any more action on the computer. You want to shut it down because what happens typically in this case is if there was a virus, they typically spread to other parts of your company and network. So that would be like immediate action you want to take, but you do want to call your IT provider or person because they're the best people to advise you at that point.
Thanks for that. And Nikhil, what an IT provider, I mean, you talked a lot about, the different processes and why we should be looking out for fraud. What do you provide for your small business clients that helps them in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, for small business owners, we don't need to boil the ocean because we recognize everyone's on a budget, they have priorities. So I think the basics to put in place are making sure your computers are updated with the appropriate, patches. You have the fundamental security tools in place, like the antivirus, making sure you're not reusing passwords across systems, especially bank accounts and other things. Your passwords are not your maiden name or not your first name or your dog's name, making sure your passwords are strong and for security recommendations. But the biggest thing really is the training, because like I said before, 90% of these things happen because human beings, we're prone to making mistakes. So we want to make sure that you're trained, your employees are trained, not just once a year, but regularly, so that we can stay on top of mind on some of these things.
That's great.
There is a
Nikhil.
longer
One of the
answer to your question, Mike, because there are tons of things to be done. But so this was the Cliff Notes version of your answer to your question.
Thanks, Nikhil. And one of the things that M&T Bank recommends to our clients on the security part is to something as simple as having a dedicated computer for your banking. And you may say, well, I'm a small business and that's an extra expense. Yeah, it's an extra expense. But you saw in this case, and I was involved in putting the case together. This was a real live example. That client was out $300 $100,000 plus. So you look at the cost of, you know, providing a separate platform just for your banking, which, you know, a couple $100 for a laptop, you know, connected to your network, and you know, it's separate from going on the internet and potentially on emails from employees, so that, you know, those manual errors don't occur. Because, you know, I think you're right. Most of the time it is because of a, you know, someone overlooking something, or just a simple issue that could have been resolved a different way.
Yep.
So does anybody else on the line have any questions for our group here?
Much. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Great.
But,
Erin,
I do see Erin's email there in case anybody does have any other questions they'd like to reach out.
Great.
Okay.
Erin and Nikhil, do you have any last minute things you want to add?
I think there's a question come through. I'm not sure.
Yep, one just popped up. Mike, you want to go ahead and read that one for them?
Sure. Is there a time of day or week when invasions are happening? Nikhil, I'll let you take a stab at that one.
So I would say usually Friday afternoons when everyone's trying to get out of work. You want to be cautious before holidays. So before the long weekends, like Labor Day weekends, the Memorial Day weekend. So you want to be cautious. And then obviously the holiday season, you know, is a big one, because like Mike said, everybody's ordering stuff on Amazon, everybody's shopping. So those are the times you want to be extra careful, is like Fridays, right before long weekends, and the holiday season.
Yeah, a lot of times these phishing attempts will look real, and they'll follow, you know, if they have access to your systems and they're looking at your emails, and they're looking at how you're talking with your employees and how you would normally send a command. I call it a command, but, you know, a request to one of your employees who has authority to send out a wire. You know, they'll look at how you would speak to them, and they would replicate that in a fraudulent email and send that over to them, you know, on a Friday before a long weekend. Because the idea is, if they get it out, you know, if they get it out that day, then they have that full extra day where you might not realize you've been defrauded, and they'll start to move the money. It's hard to move big sums of money, and when it gets out, what they'll try to do is get it out of the country as soon as possible, and they'll have to find a corresponding bank in order to do that.
Right.
So it's like hot potato. You know,
Mhm.
you know, the money will move, and then you got to stop it. You got to try to stop it. So that extra day, I think you made a really good point, Nikhil. That extra day does come into play a big factor in that.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, also, it's important around the holiday times because of all that disruption and people not in the office. But it's also, they sit and wait once they gain access to your system. So they can sit and wait and see if there's something that is upcoming that they can act on. So it might not be something that they gain access and then, you know, you're a victim of fraud right away. They like sit and wait for that that deal to happen, right? And that wire instruction to come through, and they intercept at the very last moment. And, you know, you don't know that they've been sitting watching the whole time. So it is kind of scary.
Great question, Larry. Thanks for sparking that conversation. Another question coming in: should employees be assured that if they exhibit excess caution, thus causing delay, that this will be seen as good, not as an impediment or delaying process? Conversely, any delay should be deemed part of the process. interesting question there. And what would you, Nikhil, how would you, I know how I would talk to small business owners about that. What would you say?
Mike, your voice was cutting off. Can you clarify or repeat the question?
Sure. The question in the chat says, should employees be assured that if they exhibit excess caution, thus causing a delay, that this will be seen as good, not as an impediment or delaying process?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would love some more clarification on the delay and the good, but I think by taking excess caution, if you're delaying payments or if you're delaying any kind of business processes, obviously to an extent, I think it's acceptable. Obviously, there's a balance, right? You don't want to be super cautious, so super cautious that your business comes to a standstill. So it's almost like you have to figure out as you're getting some phishing emails or if you're seeing other activity on in your business, which ones you want to pay extra attention to versus which ones. So for example, if there's anything that's related to financial implications, you want to be super cautious, and the delay at that point might be acceptable. But if you're doing something that's non-financial, non-sensitive information, you probably still want to be cautious, but not to the same extent.
I love that answer. Aaron, anything you want to add to that?
I would just add to have very specific, process in place. So, maybe having a process in place for red flags and what those red flags are, and, how you're supposed to, who that next line is to communicate those red flags to. So it's so that it's very clear and the employee, has clear direction. And then, if you have that added layer in place, I think that can help streamline.
Great. And both of you were saying is it's around training. It's around training employees, setting expectations, and making sure that they're comfortable. All employees should feel comfortable raising any issues and not jumping into something if they aren't.
Yeah, and Mike, I would add that you want to understand what makes sense in the context of your business, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So, for example, for a manufacturer, the controls you want to put in place, the things you want to look at from a process standpoint could be very different from, say, a financial services or insurance company. So any kind of process you want to put in place, any security policies or controls, while they're common across businesses, they also differ across different businesses depending on the level of risk you're willing to accept. So that's why I would look at my business and then see what makes sense for my business, my customers, and the level of risk I can tolerate.
Yeah, you may be a small business owner that has a bookkeeper, and you'll want the bookkeeper to authorize to pay up to $10,000 in wires, right? And that's what risk you're willing to take. But you may tell her, you may put the internal controls to say, I need to sign off on anything bigger than that. So that's just one example of an internal control you can put in place. And the banks can help you with that as well. But you could also have the internal policies in order to start that process. I love the questions to spark a additional conversation. If anybody else has any questions, we're happy to answer that. All right, Nikhil or Aaron, any last comments you want to make?
I want to say thank you. It was a pleasure to be able to present to you guys today. I look forward to the opportunity
to connect with all of you, and I am happy to speak to you guys further.
Yeah, I echo Erin's comments. Thank you. It's been an honor, and thank you to BCW for giving us this opportunity.
Mike, thank you so much for presenting on this today. This is such an important topic, especially this time of year, Nikhil, as you had mentioned. For those of us that are on today, if you need to rewatch any of this for any additional information, the webinar will be posted on the Business Council's Facebook page, as well as our Resource Center. Erin has kindly shared her email with us on the presentation. So if you have any additional questions, I'm sure you can reach out to her. So thank you again, and everyone have a safe, wonderful holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.